Good afternoon. It is a pleasure to welcome you to Spotlight on the NGV Collection, a unique series of live online events designed exclusively for supporters and Business Council members of the NGV. Through this unique series, we will shine a light on aspects of the NGV Collection over the coming months. My name is Misha Exarian. I am Associate Director of Fundraising at the NGV, and I wish to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which this event is taking place. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to all Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be joining us today. Before we get started, I have some quick housekeeping notes for everyone. We want you to feel involved in this seminar. So if you have any questions today, please feel free to use the chat function to the right of our live stream video. To post a question, you need to sign in to a Gmail or Google account. Just click on the sign in link in the upper right-hand corner of the page and follow the prompts. We will endeavour to get through as many questions as possible during the presentation, and we apologise in advance if we aren't able to get to everybody's questions. So thank you again for joining us for this live online discussion exclusively for NGV supporters as well as our valued Business Council members. As you've heard from Tony Elwood's video introduction, today's presentation will shine a light on a range of works being presented as part of the NGV's 2020 annual appeal, encompassing extraordinary works of art and design. For those not familiar with the annual appeal, every year the NGV selects an important work of art to be presented to the community for philanthropic support, with the goal of securing the work for the NGV collection and ultimately for the broader benefit of all Victorians and visitors to the gallery. Previous annual appeals included Salvador Dali's Trilogy of the Desert, the first Dali painting of its kind to enter the collection of an Australian museum, and Sai Goi Chung's Murmuration, a landmark large-scale installation comprising over 10,000 porcelain birds. This year, we are delighted to be presenting a suite of works, including rare and historical pieces that will help address critical areas of development in the collection, as well as new commissions by leading artists and designers to be premiered at the much anticipated 2020 Triennial, opening in December. It is a pleasure to be exploring this exciting suite of works as part of the focus for today's event, while raising awareness around the important role that philanthropy plays in the life of the NGV. Leading us today are no fewer than 9 of my esteemed curatorial colleagues who are looking forward to telling us more. So I wish to start by handing over to Senior Curator of Contemporary Art, Dr. Simon Maidment, and Katerina Prusa, Assistant Curator of Contemporary Art, who are presenting 2 exciting works to be premiered in the forthcoming 2020 Triennial. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Misha. It's a pleasure to speak to everyone today. I'm going to introduce the practice of Tomoaki Suzuki to you. Just a little bit of background on his biography. Tomoaki Suzuki was born in Mito, Japan in 1972 and studied sculpture at Tokyo Sokai University. He then moved to London in 1998 for an MA at Goldsmith in Fine Art and has continued to live and work in East London ever since. Suzuki is renowned for his hand-carved and painted wooden sculptures using traditional Japanese wood carving techniques and tools, which we can see here in his studio in the background. We will be presenting a group of 10 figurative sculptures by Suzuki later this year at NGV Triennial 2020. This is one of the works we are hoping to bring into the collection, and a great example of these very vividly painted limewood sculptures he's famous for. He portrays a diverse cast of subjects through his works. Suzuki has developed this interest in the human figure and in fashion as a visual language while studying at Goldsmith after graduating and during the early days of personal style blogs. he started to create these lifelike wooden sculptures as something like an analog take on a fashion blog, really. Looking at these works over the past 2 decades, they really reflect the quickly changing trends in contemporary fashion and consumer culture.
Kat, you mentioned that Tomoaki. Hi. You mentioned that Tomoaki studied traditional sculpting methods when he undertook his studies in Japan. I was just wondering whether there was particular artists in that traditional genre that he was looking to during that period.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was inspired by his professors, but also very much by the 19th century Japanese artist Densho Hiraguchi, who introduced a new approach of wooden sculpture into Japan by combining traditional Japanese carving techniques with a realistic Rodin-esque European style, which he brought to Japan in the late 19th century. Hiraguchi carved very realistic portraits of ordinary people with acute precision, very much like Suzuki is doing today. And Suzuki is particularly interested in his obsession with the everyday, which he also shares. He also feels a connection with the works of 20th century and contemporary artists, such as Ron Mueck, who we're all familiar with, Alberto Giacometti, Donald Judd, Andy Warhol, On Kawara, and German photographers such as August Sander or Thomas Ruf. Suzuki casts his models on the streets of London, especially his neighborhood in the east of London, Hackney, and chooses his models based on their personal style and attitude. They're mostly young people in their 20s and 30s and often belong to specific expressive subcultures. This pair here depicts 2 twin brothers who he came across in East London as well and was captivated by their confidence and coolness. And this work is part of the group that we are hoping to acquire. From the beginning of starting his work in this way, he really wanted to create objects that sort of sit between sculptures and toys. So he made the decision to create the figures at 30% of life size, of the human size, which is usually between 50 and 60 centimeters. So they're an interesting dimension of quite a unique scale for sculptural works, really. There also was a practical side to this decision. So this size is very comfortable for him for hand carving. Much larger, it would become difficult, and they're also easily portable. And in small spaces where he lived in London, this is really what he could accommodate. The sculptures are remarkable in the way they can stand on their own feet, and they are installed directly on the gallery floor without any support or a plinth. And they really come to life through the eyes of the visitors. We can see here visitors interacting with these 2 works. Most people in this case as well have to crouch down to get a close look at the details. And that really changes our perception of the space around us and makes us interact very intimately with the figures. His hope is that the work reminds us of our childhood and universal experiences like the joy of encountering new toys or dolls. They really captivate all age groups, these works. Suzuki considers the relationships of his sculptures and the space they are exhibited in as very important. He explains that in Japan, the word shakai means borrowed landscape, a term used in Japanese garden design, and he really thinks of his sculptures as activating the relationship between the viewer and the space. Although Suzuki does not use online media as a reference, his practice is very much analog. His mode of presenting the sculptures in this way, we can see in this image here, quite distant from each other, not looking at each other, that creates a tension between connection and isolation that is quite comparable to the effects of online networking that we are experiencing today. These figures pictured here are 8 of the 10 sculptures we hope to acquire for the collection. They're made between 2009 and 2019. And looking at them all together, we can really gauge his interest in how special possessions and accessories can hold a lot of meaning to us as individuals. He refers to the treasured belongings that were depicted in ancient Egyptian art, or luxurious clothing depicted in historical European paintings. And he really applied this idea into street fashion, where he's captivated by people that have trademark accessories or items of clothing that he captures in his works.
Hi, Kat. Simon again. Now, Tomoaki is making 2 new sculptures as part of those 10 that the NGV is acquiring, yes, all of which will be shown in the NGV Triennial. But I know that he normally spends quite a long time in the close proximity with his subjects. Has the current restrictions, have they had an impact on the making of these new works?
Yes, so we have been in touch with him and have learned that, in fact, he did have some complications with one of the models in particular, Marisa, who's a Canadian citizen and had to return to Canada just before the lockdown in a hurry. So he was in the middle of this quite long process of making the work, and therefore they had to finish the work remotely. So Marina is posing in front of a computer in Canada, and he's working on the sculpture in front of his computer in East London, which is quite a remarkable marker of our time right now. The other new sculpture he's making is of a man called Rio, who actually remained in London, so they were able to safely continue this work. He wasn't able to go into the studio, but set up a home studio, which, again, because of the quite small size of the works, is easily doable for him. And we can see here Rio and the unpainted sculpture of Rio in the foreground. Tomoaki Suzuki takes hundreds of photographs and hours of video of his models, in addition to the live sculpting in the studio, and also makes drawings. Here's another snapshot of the work in progress. And then the final stage is really the painting of the sculpture, which is extremely meticulous and really accurately captures the different textures and tones of the model's clothing and skin. I think we're now at the end of this presentation on Tomoaki, and I'm really excited to hear Simon's insights into Des Lawrence. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Kat. It's a pleasure. Des Lawrence is a British artist. He was born in 1970 and lives and works in London. And he's a prolific painter, Des, even though he's little known in his hometown. He's constantly working in the studio. He came to our attention when we visited an exhibition of his at White Cube. He was in a 3-person show called The Real 3 Propositions, and the 4 works on screen at the moment are 4 paintings from that exhibition. Des makes paintings and drawings inspired by newspaper obituaries that he pours through, selecting notable figures as his subject and the subject of his works, despite never knowing them personally. And he creates these portraits through a likeness, choosing an image of their accomplishments or something associated with them. So, for instance, in these, we see on the top left a vocal recording booth honouring record producer George Martin. On the right at the top, a group of chairs designed by Jens Rissum, the first designer for Knoll, who brought Scandinavian design sensibility to a wide audience internationally. On the bottom left, some sticks of asparagus, and these represent the passing of Paul Bocuse, voted Chef of the Century in 2011, and the iconic Marshall guitar amp, which is with which Jim Marshall revolutionized the sound of rock music. So these were 4 works in that exhibition. While they were being exhibited, Des began this painting. This is a 2 meter by roughly 3 meter wide painting using a kind of silver point and enamel paint, kind of paint that you might use on a kind of plastic model. Like most of the images, this one has been chosen to kind of memorialize a subject who's passed. It's entitled Henry Wolseley. And by doing this, Lawrence considers his work a kind of history painting, a genre which is rarely explored in contemporary art. But this is a really extraordinary example of Des's painting practice. In fact, it's only an image of a work in progress, would you believe? It still has had at this point some finer elements to add. The piece is now finished, which took about 6 months on and off while he worked on some smaller works at the same time. It depicts an icebreaker in the Antarctic Circle, and represents the passing of Wolseley 4 years ago, while he was attempting to be the first person to cross Antarctica unaided. And we have a short video now in which Des discusses his working process of painting and what he's trying to achieve in this painted form. And he's being interviewed by Toby Camps, who was the curator of the exhibition we saw in London.
What are we looking at here?
In the studio, we're looking at some work in progress, which is a load of stencils for this big painting over here. And yeah, my working technique, I make a big drawing, cut it up into many different pieces, and then layer it, and then cut up lots more and spray through the stencil, and end up with a painting, and then get the brushes out and start touching it and playing with it. So that's how it works. But it's quite time consuming and labor intensive, but it gives a sort of flat surface with very, very sort of over sharp edges that kind of hit you. And then I could soften them, but I tend not to. I tend to like keep it slightly hypered.
Are you enhancing vision? I'm
sharpening it in ways that are slightly awkward in a way. I'm kind of playing the other side of a painterly painter to some degree. There's painterliness in it on a very small level, but I'm not slipping things into the distance, and I'm trying to make it something that hits you a little bit harder than that.
Tell us about these enamel paints.
These are, here they are. They're kind of hobbyist paints. So as a boy, I would have kind of done them to do airfix kits of railway stations or things like that. They're quite difficult to use. There are lots of things they don't do, but there are some things that they do very nicely.
This is predominantly airbrush then?
A lot of it is, yeah. Sort of towards the end, the brushes come in. So yeah, the early laying it down. If I put it with a brush, it wouldn't have that kind of cleanly sharpness. It could never do that. So that's how it sets it up.
You've also spoken about a kind of myopia where the surface details and the technique and magic that occur in laying down paint is as interesting to you as the overall subject matter. Is that correct?
I think it is to a lot of artists, a lot of painters. Having something in front of you that matters, that it's like that you've made it like that, and it's certain, and someone looking at it knows that it was meant to be like that, and there's something at stake in its making, and I love that. That's why I come to the studio. Those are the magic moments.
The subject of the NGV painting, Henry Wolseley, was a former British Army officer and adventurer, and he spent his entire career as an amateur historian and explorer retracing Ernest Shackleton's footsteps. Shackleton took part in 4 British expeditions to the Antarctic between 1907 and 1921 and tried unsuccessfully to reach the South Pole, getting to within 180 kilometres of it. The image of a boat in the Antarctic landscape brings with it echoes of Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, and in fact, Wolseley was a relative of the ship's captain. Shackleton's survival, and that is of his crew, when the Endurance was crushed by ice and sank in Antarctic waters, was legendary and inspired Wolseley. Attempting to be the first person to successfully cross the Antarctic unaided with no colleagues or even dogs, Wolseley collapsed 50 kilometres from the finish and subsequently died from the health problems he sustained. So this painting incorporates the pathos of both adventurers and also there's courage and zeal of both Shackleton and Wolseley, but rendered using Des's trademark and painstaking technique. And the result is a painting that has a nuanced atmosphere and graphic crispness that's not quite real. The painting is both a tribute to the deceased and a meditative process, as you've just heard Des talk about, in depicting the detail of an image. So the work, like Tomoaki's, will be publicly presented for the first time ever in the NGV Triennial, along with 3 other works on paper that the NGV has acquired by Des Lawrence, our first works of Des's in the collection. These each depict a glamorous Hollywood actress from the late 1950s. Here's Janet Leigh, perhaps most famous for her performance in Hitchcock's Psycho. Deborah Kerr, who starred in The King and I and An Affair to Remember. Lawrence has noted he was interested in replicating the different visual aspects of the colour photography of that period, in particular the colour film emulsion that gave the subject a kind of, rendered it with a kind of glamour. And these 3 works were the first works of Lawrence's that he employed colour, being a largely monochrome artist prior to these. And they kind of represent a significant step in his practice, which leads to significant works like the NGV painting, which kind of exemplifies the qualities of colour that he starts experimenting with these 3 works. And of course, here's Farrah Fawcett with those signature locks and the star of Charlie's Angels.
Well, Simon, that's brilliant. That's just gorgeous. Do you have any insight on what the inspiration for Des is to started working this way, choosing the subjects in this way?
Yeah, it's interesting you ask because he's a graduate of both Glasgow School of Art and, like Tomoaki, Goldsmiths College in London, and both of those art schools are renowned for their conceptual practices. And a little like Tomoaki again, he's influenced by Japanese conceptual artists on Kawara. Most notably on Kawara's series of a durational series of paintings called the Today series, and these consisted of Kawara painting just the day and date that the painting was painted on as the content of the painting. So just the white letters on kind of a solid block background, and I think Des is sort of drawn to this way of working because for him, it takes some of the anxiety out of the equation of being an artist, not having to kind of come up with the next body of work or what the next subject of the work is. All he has to do is choose a person that he recognizes their name from the newspaper and research how to kind of represent their life with a kind of emblematic image.
That's fascinating.
Thank you so much, Simon and Kat, for that incredible insight into both works. And actually, it would be a great opportunity for me to acknowledge the supporters who have already pledged outstanding commitment towards making these acquisitions possible. That includes Triennial champions Neville and Di Batali, Chris and Cheryl Thomas, Tim and Gina Fairfax, Janet Whiting, Philip Lukes and their family, and also the Gwyneth Nancy Head Foundation. For Des Lawrence, we've been able to receive some wonderful support from Susan Kirkham towards the work, but I must confess that we do still have a long way to go, so any support towards being able to make these 2 acquisitions possible will really be greatly appreciated by everybody at the gallery. This is actually also a good moment for us to throw to any questions that you might have for the curators. And in fact, Kat, we already do have one question for you, which is around the length of time it takes for Tomoaki to produce a single sculpture. Are you able to tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So each of the works takes him about 3 months to create. And during that process, Suzuki spends a lot of time with his models in the studio. They often visit up to 20 times, and for sort of periods of 2 hours. So it's a really long and intimate process. And during the modeling and live sculpting, they talk about the models live and listen to their favorite music. So it's it's a really wonderful, intimate process.
So he creates an environment that's conducive to sitting for a long period of time, I take it.
That's right. I would hope they are comfortable, but they do have to keep these postures, of course, for long stretches of time. But he also makes photographs and videos,
of course.
As I mentioned. Yeah.
And Simon, a similar question to you around the time in which it takes Des Lawrence to produce a work, particularly the size and scale of the work that we're going to be hopefully acquiring. How long would that take him? Do you know offhand?
So the piece, Henry Wolseley, was 6 months, which is on the lengthy side for Des. It's one of his more complex paintings, and certainly it's one of his more ambitious in terms of scale. He's only made a few of these enamel paintings at this scale previously, and you saw one being produced in his studio. But this one has, an enormous amount of organic landscape incorporated in it, but retains that sharp, hyper-real sensibility. So it was a real feat of technical undertaking, and it was about 6 months of dedicated time.
You're completely correct. The technical brilliance of the work will be captivating our audiences once the triennial opens in December for sure. So thank you so much, Simon and Kat. We really appreciated your involvement in today's event. And what is also wonderful is that I'm now going to throw to my colleagues in the 17th century galleries that are actually directly behind me. So I'm excited to be joined by our Senior Curator of International Art, Dr. Ted Gott, alongside Simone Liemon, our Curator of Contemporary Design and Architecture, who are going to tell us more about an exciting commission by a leading designer by the name of Faye Toogood. So I'm going to throw to them now. Thanks.
Thank you, Misha, and hello everyone. London-based British designer Faye Toogood works across interior design, furniture and lighting, fashion and textiles, sculpture and object design. Her interdisciplinary practice is characterised by personal narrative, material experimentation, and the idea that the interior and functional design is an enduring context for creative exploration. Faye Toogood's presentation for the NGV Triennial responds to the NGV collection of 17th century British, Flemish and Dutch art, and it explores the theme of light. Now, Faye has been studying our collection and she's identified the 3 themes of daylight, candlelight and moonlight to craft a succession of interiors in which our 17th century collection artworks sit in dialogue with her own cutting-edge designs and hand-painted scenography for the walls and the floors, sculptures, her lighting and furniture. Now, we'd like to thank Gordon Moffat and the Susan Dorban Bequest for their generous support of the acquisition of a collection of Faye's extraordinary furniture and lighting works, including the roly-poly chair, elemental table and cup stool in lithium barium crystal. These works are masterpieces and they represent some of the finest example of contemporary creative design and production in the world today. Now there's more. As part of this exciting presentation, Faye has designed 2 large-scale wool and cotton tapestries especially for a presentation. Now, they are presently on the loom and they are being woven in Belgium by one of the greatest tapestry workshops in operation today. And Misha, I do believe you are standing in front of the wall where the daylight tapestry will hang. At 2.9 by, oh, there you are, Misha. Yes, showing the wall. So at nearly 6.7 metres in width and nearly 2 metres height, Faye's Day Tapestry is a homage to the golden age of Flemish tapestry during the 16th and 17th century when the art flourished. And the Daylight Tapestry depicts an imaginary landscape of a countryside. It is an assemblage composed of elements drawn from Faye's favourite paintings in our 17th century collection. And the countryside appears in shades of blues and greens, with grapes, bread, oysters and napkins appearing as oversized elements and representing trees, rocks and clouds. The image is rendered in a collage effect. Now, this is a visual style for which Too Good is synonymous. And now I'm joined by my colleague, Ted Gott, Senior Curator of International Art, and we're standing right in front of one of the very paintings that Faye has referenced in the Daylight Tapestry. And Ted, could you tell us a little bit about it and why this artist is revered for their use of light?
Absolutely. Simone, this is our still life with fruit by Jan de Heem. It's painted around 1640 to 50. Now, de Heem was the most celebrated still life painter working in the golden age of Dutch art in the 17th century. He was born in Utrecht, but had a large practice in Antwerp as well. So his production crossed between the Netherlands and Flanders. And this is what is known in Dutch as a pronkstilleven, or a sumptuous still life. And that's exactly what we've got here. We've got a stone bench inside a house that's just filled with gorgeous objects and a wonderful congerie of beautiful things to eat. Everything from oysters to fruits to bread. We have glassware from Germany and the Netherlands, a wonderful Roma or beer glass. We've got a champagne flute. We've got a fantastic silver gilt cup, very similar to the cup by Jan Vischer in our own collection, which comes from Germany. And then we have import ware with the Chinese porcelain coming from the Far East that reminds us of the Dutch East India Company, who were the masters of trade in the 17th century.
Yeah.
What we're seeing here is everything lit by a shaft of light.
Because I was going to ask you, how do we know this was painted by daylight? Because it looks like it's painted by candlelight. And I've always thought that when I've seen
this. But when you look in closely and you look into the top of the champagne glass and the Roma glass, you can see the windows through which the light comes, and in the champagne glass you can also see a reflection of the house across the street. Now, it's hard to see here, of course, but if you go to our collection online, you can zoom in on this painting in high focus and you can see those reflections. So we know the light's coming in from the top left, and it's brilliantly illuminating everything within a fairly dark corner of a Dutch interior.
Now, Ted, Faye has taken particular interest in the linen cloth, or the napkin here to the bottom right, and it appears in the tapestry to the left top corner as a big, large illuminated cloud. Can you tell us a little bit about why this napkin is popping in Faye's tapestry. Is it a particular technique that the artist has used here?
Well, it's the focal point of the light. It's where the light finishes. So it's almost the perspective point of the painting. But it's also saying something else about Dutch culture, which, as still today and then in the 17th century, Dutch and Flemish life was renowned for its pristine cleanliness. And what stands out in this napkin is that it's freshly laundered, it's beautifully clean and gleaming, and it's a metaphor for the state of the rest of this house, which would have been in absolutely pristine condition, as indeed this gathering of expensive tableware and expensive fruits is a metaphor for the luxury, the prosperity, and the quality of life in the Netherlands at this time.
And that's what Faye is really drawing attention to by working with the 17th century collection, because she acknowledges that light is not simply a device which brings an image to the picture plane, but it also delivers narrative, metaphor. It delivers so much to an image that I guess it's all this rich embedded content and information which we can draw out of these works. And what time of year, because I'm sensing that a lot of this fruit represents a particular time of year.
It certainly does. But there's one fruit that's not in season, and that's the cherry. All of the other fruits are autumnal fruits. So we know that this painting was created in autumn, possibly late autumn, when the window for light's very small in the Northern Hemisphere. So really you've only got full sunlight in late autumn between about 10 a.m. and 2 p.m.
So that's why I've always thought it was painted by candlelight, but it's autumnal light.
Yes. And you know, the interior of this Dutch household would have been pretty shadowy at all times of the year, but especially so as we're approaching winter. But here we've just got this shaft of light. What Faye's done is almost imagine like a gust of wind has come in, picked up this napkin, dragged it out the window, and it's flown up into the sky to become a cloud. Similarly, the bread she's taken and turned it into a dwelling. And of course, bread is what sustains human life, so of course it becomes a dwelling in her tapestry, which is about collage. And taking elements and then combining them in strange new ways to delight and surprise us.
Yeah, because Faye's imagined landscape, it's an impossible landscape in that it's a complete construction, but these paintings are also constructions. There's nothing natural, so to speak, about this scene.
No, you probably wouldn't have seen this in the corner of an everyday home, but this is part of the point. The sumptuous still life, it is an allegory of the bounty and riches of life in the Netherlands and Flanders in the 17th century. And notice how everything is sort of tilted here. It's about, it looks as though everything's about to fall into your lap, which is in itself a metaphor for the superabundance, the quality of life. And what's remarkable when you look at this picture, you think that in the 1640s, typical family perhaps in the United Kingdom, they're not eating these beautiful fruits. They would have had far more simple fare. What incredibly healthy food we see here. Presented gorgeous fruits, fresh oysters, citrus. Really, you know, it's a picture that's bursting with the energy of vitamins, even before they're defined and known to medical science. So not only are they living well, but they're living healthy.
Living healthy and well. Now, Ted, there's a second tapestry. So the night tapestry is nearly 5 metres in width and approximately 3 metres in height. It depicts an imaginary village in a landscape by night, and it's composed of elements drawn from a selection, once again, of Faye's favourite 17th century prints from the NGV collection. The tapestry appears in shades of silver and grey, with figures ascending from whirling clouds and cloth drapery giving form to rocks that look like breadsticks. The night tapestry, as with the daylight tapestry, will be presented in the company of the 17th century works to which Faye references. And to share her thoughts on the 17th century prints appearing in the night tapestry, it's my pleasure to introduce Senior Curator of Prints and Drawing, Kathy Lay.
Hello, Simone, and hi, Ted. Thank you for that wonderful expose on the paintings. We worked with Faye Toogood to select a group of prints from the collection that would go on display in the gallery with her tapestry. There's a wonderful group of works that include etched candlelight genre scenes, biblical nighttime scenes by artists ranging from Rembrandt, Adam Elsheimer, Ostade, and Hendrik Goltzius. And Goltzius was an artist who's particularly piqued the interest, I think, of Faye Toogood. We've got two works by him here on the screen. He was a leading Dutch Mannerist artist and one of the greatest engravers of his age. He was known for his extraordinary technical expertise and facility, and a real ability to particularly create these effects of sparkling light and deep blacks, just using his engraving burren. And so what we can see those effects in these two prints on the screen. On the right, an image of the Adoration of the Shepherds, and you can see the central shepherd is just holding a candle, and the light from that single flame is uplighting the faces of the shepherds and the Virgin Mary. This is an early state, not finished. A very different image of light is seen in the other print by Goltzius. And here we have an image, an illustration to Ovid's Metamorphoses that's showing the kind of primal void or the primal chaos and the creation of the elements of the earth. You can see a great the great planetary sphere of Earth being formed there in the centre, and this kind of extraordinary kind of comet-like flashing light that's created there and lighting up the kind of this cosmic void. Now, these two prints, as I mentioned, really fired Faye's imagination, and we can see she's taken elements of them and put them into her tapestry. So if you can see in the top right-hand corner, the shepherd here holding that single flame, appearing in swirling clouds and illuminating this kind of dusky landscape below. And on the left, that planetary sphere, Earth, from the primal chaos image, has become this wonderful monumental moon that's appearing over the horizon there. Another work that really interested Faye is this work executed by one of Goltzius's students or followers, Jan Muller. It's another Adoration of the Shepherd, but here we see a divine light that's actually penetrating the gloom of the stable, coming through the clouds in the centre and actually emanating from the Christ child in the Virgin's lap. And the Virgin herself reappears as a motif back into the tapestry. There she is, this little lone figure walking within this landscape. And I think this print also by Muller gives us a very good example of the type of vocabulary of the language of engraving that I think is also being picked up and used here by Faye Toogood. You can see in the swirling clouds, those kind of swirling lines, engraved lines. Shadow and depth of tone is created engraving by cross-hatching that can be seen in the mountains in the background there. So she's really responded to the works in the collection in these kind of quite disparate ways, but come up with her own creation. And I think it's really very interesting. It's very interesting to me, I think, that, the way she's used these references, combining them with her own marks and, the disparities of scale that she introduces are really quite fascinating, I think. And she's created her own landscape that really merges these three art forms, prints, drawings and tapestry. It's a wonderful work, I think, and has a wonderful connection back to the NGV's collection.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And it's actually a great moment for us to warmly thank the supporters who have already donated towards this new commission by Faye Toogood. That includes Betsy Polisek, as well as Susan Jones and James McGrath and Susan Kirkham. So now, if you have any questions for our curatorial speakers today, please feel free to submit your questions into the live chat. And actually, Simone, a question that's come through, are you able to tell us a little bit more about whether this is the first project of its kind that Faye has undertaken?
It's a great question. Well, Faye's exhibited in museums and galleries all around the world. Her practice has been evolving fairly rapidly over the last decade, but this is without a doubt the most ambitious presentation that Faye has ever taken on. And Misha, she often will say to me in conversation of late of just how blessed she is with this opportunity, because she's able to bring interior, tapestry, furniture, lighting and sonography all together to produce a succession of interiors which will be immersive and really bring, I guess, the various ideas and the concepts that we're trying to explore more broadly across the floor of light here on the second floor at NGV International.
And the tapestries at the moment, you said that they're being produced in Belgium, is that right?
They are. So I've seen photographs of the strikes, and the strikes are the first sort of items to be woven from the image. It's digital tapestry, which is most common these days, but they are being woven in Belgium at Flanders Workshop, which is the workshop that every artist and designer in the world wants to work with. And so Faye has been in a queue, so to speak, for the last 10 months to buy the time on the loom. And we had been a bit concerned that there'd be a hold up with the tapestry. But I spoke to her the other night and the strike-offs are off the loom. And so they're actually being woven as we speak. So it's very exciting.
Incredible. And so Ted, your area of focus is normally historic international art. So how do you see a contemporary interpretation like Faye's progressing? Is that something that's of interest to you?
Oh, absolutely. It's tremendously exciting. And you know, what it tells us is not only the power of art to be eternally relevant throughout the time. I mean, yes, this meant something in the 17th century to contemporary Dutch and Flemish audiences. It means something possibly slightly different to us as today's viewers coming to it from a different perspective. But what we're going to see with Faye Toogood's interpretation of it is an artist responding directly to a work from the past. Our viewers will be able to see things in Faye's work that will bring them back to look anew at our 17th century painting by De Heem, so everybody wins. I mean, there's a great saying that artists love to repeat, that nothing comes from nothing. All artists look at previous artists' work for inspiration, guidance and help. And what we've got with Faye Toogood and Jan De Heem is a marvellous dialogue across the centuries that keeps both contemporary and historical art perpetually bubbling and exciting and meaningful and relevant to audiences.
Definitely. And relevance is critical to our engagement with audiences, isn't it? Well, thank you so much, Ted and Simone, for that insight. And you heard Kathy speak earlier, but it's wonderful to welcome Kathy back. Kathy is our Senior Curator of Prints and Drawings, who will be providing us with a little bit of insight into a rare and historically significant work by William Blake. Over to you, Kathy.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Misha. And I'm very pleased to be able to present this afternoon a new addition to the NGV's William Blake collection. As everyone here would know, the NGV is very well known internationally for the strength of its Blake's holdings, in particular for our 36 watercolours of the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri that Blake illustrated at the end of his life. And we purchased this group of works along with another 40 works by Blake in 1920, and that founded our Blake collection. The collection really then remained static for several decades, but in the later 1980s, we began to collect books illustrated by Blake, and also his work as an engraver. And there's this marvellous example of a very important book, one of the works by which he was best known during his own lifetime, this wonderful 1797 publication, Young's Thoughts, Night Thoughts by Edward Young. If we move on to the next slide. Also, in 1988, we were very fortunate to purchase this marvellous little book on the left, one of Blake's illuminated books. It's his Songs of Innocence. So he not only made engravings after the work of other artists and illustrated texts by other authors, but of course he used prints and engraving to produce his own books of poetry. And if we move on to the next image now, that provides us with the context and the background for the works that really presenting today and wanted to focus on. What we have here and the work that we've identified for today is the image on the right, a little book known as Hayley's Ballads, and very grateful to Hugh and Elizabeth Morgan, who have very generously supported the acquisition of this work for the collection. We bought, so that work together with the work to its left there, both come from a really a period in Blake's life that we didn't previously represent. We bought the work on the left in 2017. We didn't previously represent at all. And because we have such strong holdings, we're constantly trying to augment and supplement where our strengths are. The period, it's the early 1800s for Blake, when he spent 3 years in the countryside, the only time he moved out of London, and that was at the behest of a private patron, William Hayley. And Hayley was a very wealthy man, a man of letters, and he invited Blake and his wife to come and live on his estate in a little cottage, and he promised to help Blake with commissions and to help him secure work, because by this point in Blake's career, he was getting less and less work for his jobbing engraving. So this was a quite optimistic time. Blake moved to the countryside, and Hayley got him involved in a whole series of commissions, painting his son, painting panels for the library. But the most important commission was this. The work that he began in 1801, writing a series of ballads on anecdotes relating to animals, specifically for Blake to engrave. And they first were published in the form that we see on the left, this kind of larger format, that were issued monthly. Unfortunately, in that format, they didn't sell well, and so the projects ceased. And Blake returned to London in 1803, but the two of them continued with this project and decided to release it in a new format. And that's where the little book that we're presenting today really comes about. Blake re-engraved 5 of the images that he'd produced, and they were issued in this smaller format. What you see here is the kind of title page and the first of the ballads, the first image Blake produced, and it's to the ballad about the dog, and it's a long ballad. It tells about the heroism of this dog who saves his owner from death by sacrificing himself by leaping into the jaws of the crocodile in the waters below. And if we just move to the next image, thank you. These are 3 other of the images in the book. What we don't know really, there's no commentary by Blake on Hayley's poetry, and they were ballads intended for children. It was about the calibre of the poetry, but what we can see is that Blake himself produced these marvellous images, and I think, particularly the image on the right there, this encounter between the mother shielding her child from the kind of rampaging horse, is a really wonderful image. So this little book helps us to represent an important period in Blake's life, and a number of the images in the book have relevance back to later images that Blake then went on to execute. So it's a very, very welcome thing, and will find its place in the NGV's Blake holdings. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And I would love to take the opportunity to officially confirm how wonderful it is that we've had support from Hugh and Elizabeth Morgan to acquire the work. So that's quite exciting for us. And Kathy, I understand there is an interesting background to the relationship between Hayley and Blake. Are you able to tell us a bit more?
There is, Misha, there is. Blake was such a irascible kind of character. William Hayley, we're very well-meaning and well-intended, but Blake, in the time that he spent at Felpham in Sussex, grew increasingly irritated with Hayley because he felt that the commissions that he was giving him were really trivial. And in a well-meaning kind of way, Hayley tried to encourage him to, not pursue his poetry or his own original work, but to do more of the kind of engraving. And so what Blake had the final word with that. In one of his own epic poems, he created this character that he based on Hayley, and he's called Hyle. And Hyle is this very negative kind of character who has no spirit and kind of squashes creativity. And so he appears in various of Blake's later poems. And in fact, we have an image that shows Hyle. And so it's going to be wonderful to be able to show this work, the little book of ballads, Hayley, in relation to that late image. It's just a kind of really fills out the kind of story that we can tell about Blake. Yeah.
So it's a complete circle to the background there.
Yeah.
Incredible. Thank you again, Kathy. It's much appreciated. And it's now a pleasure to introduce Danielle Whitfield, Senior Curator of Fashion and Textiles, who will tell us a little bit more about an emerging fashion designer we are very excited to acquire for the fashion collection. Danny, can you tell us more?
Hi, yes I can. Hello everybody. This is a fantastic and exuberant work by Tomo Koizumi, who is an emerging Japanese fashion designer who really became the breakout star of the autumn-winter 2019 fashion season. Tomo was working as a costume designer in Tokyo with his own brand since 2011, but he first captured the attention of the Western press after one of his custom ruffled garments was worn by none other than Lady Gaga in 2016. And then in a true tale of the internet age, he gained further prominence by Instagram when his work was featured by Vogue Italia in 2018. This post was seen by influential English stylist Katie Grand, who is also the editor of Love magazine, who direct messaged Tomo saying his work was literally the best thing that she has seen in years. And she is certainly one seasoned fashion journo who would be hard to impress. This exchange led to a 30-minute phone chat during which time Grand convinced Tomo to have a fashion show during New York Fashion Week in exactly 3 weeks' time. And the image that you see here is the presentation of Tomo's debut collection at Marc Jacobs' Madison Avenue store in New York. And really Grand assembled a dream team of hair and makeup artists and models to assist with Tomo's presentation. And you can see it really captures his sort of exuberant maximalist aesthetic and also his singular material vocabulary, which, amazed audiences worldwide. The next image we have shows Tomo at home in his studio in Shibuya, where he works alongside one assistant and several interns. And as you can see, there's a lot of colourful fabric everywhere. And I think key to Tomo's aesthetic is really his use of meters and meters of Japanese polyester organza. The organza comes in over 170 different colours, but Tomo cites the fabric's strength and durability as being instrumental in enabling him to make these incredibly dense sculptural ruffled forms. He also talks about how choosing to work with a singular material is also a strategy that pushes him to consistently create something new in terms of kind of silhouette and form. This particular ensemble is the one that we will be presenting at NGV Triennial later this year. The top and skirt is from the first collection, and as you can see, it's highly exaggerated in scale, but equally striking is, I think, the polychromatic sensibility which Tomo employs. And it's interesting because he talks about how this interesting colour stems back to his childhood. He grew up in the Japanese countryside without internet, surrounded by nature, and he was really fascinated by the flower gardens in his hometown. But his mother also worked for a funeral ceremony company, and he remembers playing around in her office amongst these gigantic floral arrangements which were made for the altars. And I think you can see not only is colour, is that an inspiration for colour, but also, I guess, for the ruffled sort of petal-like forms that he creates. Top and skirt embodies Koizumi's exuberant aesthetic, as I've said, but this rainbow-hued ruffled dress really also expresses something a little bit more poignant, and it came about because he wanted to make his own version of an LGBTQ rainbow. And in Tomo's words, sort of to paraphrase an exchange that we had, he explained that he had a friend who worked for an LGBTQ organisation in Tokyo, but this friend was very adamant about sticking to the 6-colour rainbow on the pride flag, and Tomo always kind of questioned and wondered why he had this particular attitude. In Tomo's mind, the rainbow colour means inclusion, and therefore it should include many more colours, not just 6. And so in this particular outfit, he used numerous colours of dead stock fabric as an expression of this particular thought, and as a way of kind of intimating sort of an outfit that radiated pure joy and beauty. Since this moment, Tomo has continued to gain critical attention for his work and for the work's kind of visual and emotional power. He's recently been included in the Met Camp exhibition, but was also nominated for the LVMH Designer Prize. And I think this work is great, and the timeliness of it is evident, I think, both in its message of inclusivity, but also in Tomo's personal conviction that we need to see and sort of touch beauty or experience beauty in difficult times. So
incredible. Thank you so much, Danny. And we are also thrilled to learn that Christina Campbell-Priddy and her family have committed a donation towards helping us meet our fundraising target for acquiring this work. So it's a great step forward. And it's also a great time for us to throw to some questions now. So please feel free to post them in the live chat. Danny, one question that's already come through is whether you're able to tell us a little bit more about Tomo's design process.
I can and I can't. Tomo, I did actually ask him that question and he said, haha, it's a secret. But he did then go on to say that because he studied at university and was majoring in art education, he always had an interest in fine art and sculpture. So he works in a way that he sketches out the design and then makes a pattern much like a small kind of maquette, after which he then goes on to create the sort of fabric embellishments. So in this sense, his design process, I guess, starts with the the form, and then the kind of the decorative elements and the coloration come second.
Incredible. And another question that we've had that I think many of us are dying to find out the answer to is how many meters of fabric is used to create one gown? Do you know?
I know, we should have a jelly bean jar and everybody can put their guesses in, but it is actually incredible. It's 70 meters of organza fabric. And I did mention before, just in the final bit of my talk, that often Tomo uses dead stock fabric. So there is an underlying interest in sustainability also in his practice. Not always possible, but it does, he does have a consciousness that informs his design.
Thank you. And we're very excited to be able to see the exuberant nature of the work when it is on display later on this year during the NGV 2020 Triennial. So next up, I'm delighted to introduce Senior Curator and Curator of Indigenous Art, Judith Ryan and Miles Russell Cook, who will be sharing details on 3 extraordinary works by Indigenous artists. First up, I will throw to Miles. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Misha. So I'm going to be talking to you about a really exciting artist named Joy Arcand. So Joy T. Arcand is an artist from the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan, but she's currently living and working in Ottawa in Ontario. The Muskeg Lake Cree Nation is in what's called Treaty 6 territory, and Treaty 6 is an agreement that exists between the Crown Government and the Plains and Woods Cree people in Canada. So Joy has been practicing as an artist for about 15 years, since she received her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from the University of Saskatchewan in 2005. And since then, her star has really just continued to rise. In 2018, she was shortlisted for the Sobey Art Award, which is Canada's most prestigious contemporary art prize. And then just last year, her work was included in a very important exhibition at the National Gallery of Canada called Arbre de Kone, which means continuous fire. And it's a little bit like Canada's version of APT at Quagoma, in that it's Canada's biggest recurring international Indigenous art exhibition, which includes Indigenous artists from around the world. So I first encountered Joy's work in an exhibition called Insurgence Resurgence at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, which was on a few years ago. And I went over to Canada as part of an Australia Council exchange with a group of First Nations curators, Sami, Inuit, Maori, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. And at the time, it was like the deepest month of winter. So it was about negative 40 or 50 degrees. So it was very, very cold for those of us from Australia. And that's when I first encountered Joy's work. And she really did just blow us all away in that exhibition. So Joy works across media, working with whatever she feels suits the particular project that she's working on. But interestingly, she started working in photography, like these images here. So like in this image, Joy would digitally manipulate street signs, and she would create landscapes, which she would then populate with Cree language. Canadian society caters to English and French speakers. So for Joy, as a Cree person, she uses the Cree language in her practice as a way to try and disrupt the viewer's experience. So Cree is a very beautiful looking language when written, as you can see, and it's traditionally written using Cree syllabics, which you can see here. But it can also be written in Latin script as well. So Joy's fascination with the Cree language is really central to her practice, and she describes her work as kind of like a conversation with herself by asserting that she wants to speak Cree. She wants it so badly, in fact, that she will make a 10-foot neon sign out of it. So Joy first started working in neon as a response to her earlier photo montages because she had the desire to create and see the neon signs that she had imagined in the photography that she had been making. And she wanted to imagine them as real-life objects. So there are many Cree people today who don't speak language, and this is for a number of reasons. The first reason is due to the residential schools in Canada, which were a little bit like the missions in Australia, in that they were places in which Canadian Aboriginal children were removed and taught English and were told that their language was inferior. So while a lot of students would have been still speaking their native language at home, when they got to school, that stopped. And then when those kids grew up and went on to leave the residential schools as adults and go back to their communities, for the most part, their vocabulary and their knowledge of language was significantly less than the generations before them. So in Australia, we have the stolen generation, something I don't need to explain to any of you. But in Canada, they have a very similar history, which is called the 60s scoop. And the 60s scoop refers to the government scooping up Indigenous children from their families and communities for placement in foster homes or for adoption. And it's actually estimated that a total of 20,000 Aboriginal children were taken from their families and fostered out as part of the 60s scoop or adopted. So look, there's a real similarity between the history that happened in Canada and the history that we know in Australia. So it's incredibly important to Joy that within her work, she interrogates this idea of disruption, of disrupting the colonial landscape. The same way that the 60s scoop and the residential schools disrupted the transfer of knowledge, Joy wants her work to disrupt the audience experience of being in a place. So it's kind of like her way of saying the language wasn't lost, it was taken, and there are people who are now here to take it back. So really, it's all, I guess, about drawing attention to the absence of language, and she does it by what she refers to it as making it hyper-visible, so putting it in neon. So the work that Joy is making for the NGV Triennial, which we are very grateful to Dr. Michael Schwartz and Dr. David Clausen, who have made a leadership gift toward the acquisition, will be the first work by a Cree artist to enter the NGV collection. I feel like it will resonate very powerfully with an Australian and an Aboriginal public who will have seen many similar stories occur in terms of linguicide and the loss of language to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here. So sometimes Joy doesn't provide translations during exhibitions, as she doesn't want her work, doesn't want to give the audience the immediate satisfaction of understanding the word in the same way that she has experienced as someone who doesn't speak language. She rather wants to make them work for it. She sort of says that she wants them to take the time to look it up and maybe in doing so force them to learn a little bit of Cree language along the way. But for the NGV work, Joy has provided us with a translation, and this particular neon translates roughly to the flow of life in Plains Cree language. So this is an incredibly exciting work, and it will be the first work that audiences experience when they're welcomed to the floor of light. And it will remind people of the very important connections that exist between the experiences of First People around the world. So I'm now going to hand over to my friend and colleague Judith to talk to you about another really exciting work by another First Nations artist and another first for the NGV Triennial, the work of Tasmanian Aboriginal artist Vicky West, who Judith is going to talk to you about now.
Thanks very much, Miles. Partner in crime as we are, building up the Indigenous collection. I'm very excited to be able to speak to Vicky West. Vicky West is an extraordinary artist, and we're travelling from Ottawa to northeastern Tasmania. We're thinking about the importance of place and of language, because Vicky West is from northeastern Tasmania. She's pro-Woolway, and like other Tasmanian Aboriginal people of her generation, her language was taken away. She was dispossessed of country, and also there was a huge loss of life, as the tragic history of Tasmania testifies to. But she is very strong in attesting to the fact that she is still here, and Tasmanian Aboriginal people are still here as well, proudly continuing their culture and regenerating customary processes and objects that form part of their heritage. Vicky West was first introduced to Tasmanian Aboriginal basket weaving and working with kelp through a cultural workshop in the early 1990s when she was in her 30s. This customary technique was not taught to her when she was growing up. You can see in the first slide that Vicky is shown wrapped in this extraordinary natural material, which is actually diminishing in quantity, just as the Tasmanian mariner shell necklace makers are experiencing fewer and fewer of the shells that they gather. So it is with kelp. And she has been working in kelp for nearly 30 years and has an extensive exhibition history. I mean, one of the great highlights of her career was when she was represented in the last Indigenous triennial at the National Gallery of Australia. And since that time, she has really become the outstanding practitioner of kelp in Australia, and I would also say perhaps the universe. I was first introduced to Vicky's work by Julie Goff, who was working in the Indigenous Art Department, and she targeted her in about 2003 as an artist who we should definitely keep our eye on and endeavour to acquire. We were looking at the major artists in Tasmania at that time and targeting Auntie Lola Greeno, Auntie Corrie Fullard and others for their shell necklaces. And what we have seen in Tasmania is this huge resurgence of weaving, shell necklace making, and also kelp, working in kelp. And the artists have also accessed material in museum collections, such as in the British Museum and Australian museums, to actually trace back some of the stitches used in weaving and also the shape of the customary water vessels that were made by Tasmanian Aboriginal women. This is definitely a women's medium. And what Vicky has done is begin with small vessels and then transform these smaller vessels into powerful contemporary artworks interwoven with history and country. It's interesting because I was thinking about the use of neon and the powerful expressions in Cree language that we've just been looking at in Joy's work. And then we have this quantum shift to the most raw and organic of materials, the kelp that is gathered on country. For the triennial, Vicky West is creating an installation of 6 large vessels, which she has called Reflection. These vessels, you can see some of them use echidna quills, others are just roughly stitched together. And they function as art objects that possess an abstract materiality of form. And these vessels are definitely West's contemporary reinterpretation and reimagining of traditional vessels. She's used her wealth of acquired knowledge to reflect the traditional, material and customary practices of her ancestors from northeastern Tasmania. She is developing these works with the intention that they speak of the survival of old and development of new perception in relation to the cultural devastation caused by British invasion upon the original inhabitants of Lutrawita or Tasmania as it is now known. I think when we look at the way she is stitching this kelp together to make these vessels, it's incredibly resilient, this material, and it has many uses still today. And I think it's wonderful that this ancient art form will form part of the NGV Triennial, because Vicky will be the first Tasmanian Aboriginal artist to be represented in the NGV Triennial. And her works will be seen with other fabulous examples of design technology and contemporary processes that deal with organic materials. I think this small vessel here, which is similar in size to one of the water vessels, is incredible, because with this work, Vicky has adorned this work with the kelp stems around the edge of the vessel. I would think that her vessels explore and celebrate cultural survival in the face of continuing colonial myths of the extinction of her people, for she asserts, we are still here. And unfortunately, and this is really exciting for me, because it was 2003 that Julie Goff laid down the gauntlet and said, we need Vicky West in the collection. And it's taken us 17 years to get her to this stage. And I have to thank two wonderful donors, Nick Allen and Helen Nicolay. And I want to quote Nick's words about this acquisition. Helen and I are so excited we can help bring Vicky's work to the Triennial. Helen's sister, Chris, recently did a short artist residency in Japan, specifically working with kelp, and more recently purchased one of Vicky's pieces. So this it's like the stars are aligned with this wonderful acquisition coming into the NGV collection. I'm now going to pass on to another important acquisition target. We're going to move to the work of Gamilaroi Wiradjuri artist Michael Riley. He was born in the same year as Vicky West, 1960. And he's a very, very important Indigenous photographer, also from the southeast of Australia, based in Sydney, actually. He was based in Sydney. We own 3 works in our collection. The first is from the important series Fly Blown. Fly Blown is a conceptual photographic series based on beauty and decay in the Australian landscape. The series, composed of 9 images, focus on icons and symbols within a landscape setting, and it runs parallel to Riley's 1997 film Empire, which shares imagery, style and symbolism as seen in the recurring motifs of the dead galah and the cloud reflecting cross. We showed both of these works in Colony Frontier Wars because they signify the huge devastation caused to the Australian continent by colonisation, and also the untold trauma experienced by Aboriginal people through missionisation and the imposition of Christianity. They're very, very strong works, and the first work that showed the dead galah over the parched landscape of Australia, Victoria's bird actually, is going to be shown in Hannah Presley's new collection display. It's very exciting collections display, Big Weather, which looks at the impact of climate change and also the importance of Indigenous knowledge in leading us to ways in which we can protect, preserve and maintain Australia's environment and its flora and fauna. The next slide is something totally different. I Don't Want to Be a Bludger, 1999, is a collaborative work by Michael Riley and the iconic Destiny Deacon, who is here in Melbourne with us. And This work will soon be shown in the retrospective exhibition Destiny, which is going to open to the public sometime in July, very, very shortly. I Don't Want to Be a Bludger is a satirical look at urban contemporary Aboriginal life. It is basically a story, a day in the life of Destiny. Destiny's character wakes up one morning and decides she wants to be an artist and get off the dole, because she doesn't want to be a bludger all her life. She goes through all these escapades of going to art school, trying to get in and being rejected, trying to be a fortune teller, which she thought might be a career move for her as well. And it all sort of ends up in disaster for her at the end of the day. The collaborative film, written and directed by Michael Riley and Destiny, was commissioned for Living Here Now, Art and Politics, the Prospector 1999 exhibition at the Art Gallery of New South Wales. And we have to thank Craig Semple for supporting this wonderful video, and also he's been a great support of Destiny, bringing other works into our collection. I'm sure, Miles, you're very thankful for having his support, as I am. We now come to our acquisition target for this year. This is Michael Riley's Cloud series. And this was from a very resolved exhibition for Michael Riley, because it brought all elements together: his childhood, the Christianity from his childhood, the problems with that, and also histories of Aboriginal people. He tried to make connections by showing something like the cow floating in an ethereal sort of sky, a strange animal to Aboriginal people, yet it's also an animal Aboriginal people would kill when food supplies were running out. Aboriginal people would actually be shot or hunted down for doing these things, for trying to survive themselves. I think this work is phenomenal. It is surreal. To see this introduced animal floating in this cloud, in this blue sky, which is something we identify with Australia, the cloud, the blue sky of the hemisphere. It's completely out of kilter, and of course it was the cow that brought a lot of damage to the environment. Cloud was the first body of work that Michael Riley conceived in a digital medium. It was his last photographic series because he died tragically young, of kidney failure. And it is his most acclaimed series. In 2006, Cloud was selected for permanent display as part of the Indigenous Art Commissions at the Musée de Quai Branly, Paris. If I just had said that the stars were aligned with Vicky West, it's even more the case here, because the donor, Linda Hurd, states, "I am familiar with the work of Michael Riley in the Cloud series, has a particular significance to me, as it was the inspiration for the first dance work I saw performed by Bangarra in 2010. Watching this performance blew me away and led to my interest in Indigenous culture and to my now 10-year-long association with Bangarra." And this is a work that we have, that has been in our sights for many years. I remember discussing this with both Stephen Gilchrist and Julie Goff. We were very aware of it, and finally it has come home to roost. We have it in our collection, and it will be displayed in Hannah Presley's wonderful upcoming exhibition, Big Weather. Thank you, Nisha.
Incredible. Judith, Miles, thank you so much. And what an incredible moment for us to be able to bring all three works into the collection. And it's great to be able to confirm that the pieces have been successfully secured by the donors previously just mentioned by Judith and Miles, but it would be wonderful for me to mention them again: Michael Schwarz and David Clouston, Linda Hurd, Nick Allen and Helen Nicolai, who have made all of these works possible for the collection. And Miles, I understand that, as Judith mentioned, the Destiny exhibition will be opening very shortly. You must be delighted to know that.
Well, it's been a bit of a wild ride, but yes, it's opening shortly. I was just speaking with Destiny today, and so it is scheduled to open on the 24th of July. So we look forward to welcoming everybody to that show. It's very surreal having a sort of 95% installed show just sitting there, but we can't wait to welcome everybody in.
It will be. It will be such an exciting moment for all of us. So thank you to both of you. And finally, somebody who's been waiting in the wings for a long time, it's a pleasure to conclude today's session with Senior Curator of Asian Art, Wayne Crothers, who will tell us a little bit more about a print from a unique moment in Japan's history. Thank you, Wayne.
Thanks, Misha. Yeah, hello, everyone. I'd just like to introduce this incredible part of Asian history and this quite iconic work that we've managed to secure with the great help of Christina Campbell-Priddy, which really is one of the features of the Japanese modernism exhibition that some of you might have had the privilege to see. We've been working on it for 5 years. It opened for 2 weeks. We had to close it down. But I'm really happy to say that it'll be reopening tomorrow as one of the highlight features of the NGV, reopening to the public. The era is roughly between 1920 and 1940, a 20-year period where Japan really came out of the rubble of their largest earthquake of the 20th century that struck in 1923 in Tokyo and the Tokyo-Yokohama region. It was pretty much flattened, and Japan was having a very good economic time during the first few decades of the 20th century. And Tokyo and Osaka were rebuilt into these quite incredible sort of modernist, modern cities with new transportation systems, department stores, cafes, dance halls. And this incredible sort of economy and vibrant sort of culture, especially street culture, gave the opportunity to a lot of young women and young men that really became the icons, the fashion icons, the trend setters of the time, the modern girls and the modern boys, or in Japan they were known through the acronym of the Moga and the Mobo. And we see a photograph of a Moga on the screen there. You can see that she's this wonderful sort of hybrid of Western Art Deco, 1920s fashion with Japanese sort of components of dress and particular sort of features, in this case, the umbrella. And the Moga and the Moba really encapsulate the energy of this period, which is featured within the exhibition. We see another image of the modern girls on the beach down at Kamakura in their swimsuits. Of course, this new generation were really exercising all those the liberties that they were afforded through being able to have a job, earn their own income, rent their own apartment. They were the first really financially liberated generation from their parents. And also they were the first sort of financially mobile and consumer sort of young generation in Japan. So on the weekends, they went to the beach in summer, they went to the mountains in winter and autumn. They could buy the clothes they wanted to wear, they could meet the partners they wanted to meet, they could go out to cafes, they could drink at night, they could smoke and they could drink and they could come home whatever hour they wanted to. And then as long as they turned up to their place of employment the next morning. Now, the work that I'd like to sort of focus on that we've just acquired through the generosity of Christina is this incredible woodblock print. It's called The Jazz Dancer. It's by one of the most iconic artists of the time, Kobayakawa Kiyoshi. It really captures the moment of the energy, the fashion, and it also alludes to this really sort of great tradition of woodblock prints that Japan goes right back to the 1760s, and of course the famous practice of ukiyo-e prints, and everyone will be very familiar with the beautiful sort of colours and vignettes and the techniques that were used through the work of Hokusai and Hiroshige and Utamaro. And this work is really a revival work of the 1930s. that was produced called Shin Hunger Works that really captured that sort of energy of the moment. And if we zoom in a little bit onto the print, you'll see these sort of beautiful techniques of the flat purple background, rich sort of pigments that they were produced with also very delicate touches. It's hard to pick it up on the computer screen, but there are these beautiful delicate touches of vignettes of colour which indicate the rouge on her cheeks, the pink sort of pads on her fingertips and on her toes that sort of course, at the other end of the print. And it's this sort of vibrant energy as well as sort of that sort of adventurism or slight sort of promiscuous nature of the lifestyle of this new young generation of pleasure seekers that we're seeking, which is represented in this sort of really quite incredible print. Now, it's part, as I mentioned, it's part of the Japanese Modernism exhibition, which is currently being held. The NGV, we have some photographs here of the gallery space, which I encourage everyone to go and have a look. It's sort of quite an incredible body of work of acquisitions, one of the great sort of acquisition projects we've been working on over the last 5 years that bring together folding screens, women's fashion, men's fashion, interior deck arts, publishing, graphic design. It's really sort of encompassing all of the great energy and vitality of this little known era that was really came to a very dramatic end with the Second World War. And of course, Japan never really got back on their feet again until the 1970s and 1980s, which is the second modernist era of the 20th century. This sort of 1920s, 1930s is the first modernist era of the 20th century in Japan. So I'll throw back to Misha, and thanks very much, Christina, for supporting this incredible acquisition.
Yes, a big thank you to Christina Campbell-Priddy and her family who have enabled us to secure the work. And Wayne, I understand visitors will be able to see the print on display from tomorrow, is that right?
Yeah, it's very exciting to open it. As I said, working on bringing the collection together and curating the exhibition over 5 years. Unfortunately, we had to close after 2 weeks, but then it's all been in place with the lights off, and they're all coming back on tomorrow. And it's really quite a visual delight as well as an incredible insight into this first sort of modernization and within Asia, which encapsulates the first subway in Asia that was built, a huge sort of railway network, as well as some of the most beautiful sort of interior decoration, decorative objects like bronze, glass, lacquerware, etc.
So as Wayne mentioned, the exhibition was opened in March and we will be able to reopen it as of tomorrow, the 27th of July, after many months of being closed. So we look forward to welcoming many of you back into the gallery in the coming weeks. And I wish to take this opportunity to thank all NGV curators for leading us through today's session. I also wish to thank Sari DeMallory, Erin Whitfield, Tom Doman, and all staff behind the scenes who produced this online session. As you've seen today, there were some incredible pieces that were presented. And if you would like to support the annual appeal, please head to the Support Us pages on the NGV website to discover more. While we recognise that not everybody is in a position to support right now, we truly appreciate donations of any size towards securing the works explored today. And on behalf of everybody at the NGV, we thank all donors who have supported the campaign to date. Thank you. We hope you enjoyed today's talk, and we look forward to seeing you at our next online session in July, soon to be announced. So do stay tuned for further information, and don't forget that the NGV will reopen to the public from tomorrow. Have a lovely evening, and from everyone at the NGV, we thank you again for your support of the gallery. Thank you.